Well, they came up the river. They stopped first at Osage City, where the Osage comes into the Missouri River. They camped there for a couple days. They did some measurements on the river. Then they came up here. Now there's a state historical site there. It's called Clark's Hill Norton. But then they came up here on the 4th of June, about high noon. There's a painting in the state archives that shows what it was like then. It's taken from the Callaway County side of the river, and of course there's nothing there, but you can see the bluff, so that's one of my favorite paintings, and I have that in my home above the fireplace. So, and you can see it over across some of their signage here. They stopped at the mouth of the Morrill River, and then they came up through here, and something really bad happened. At the mouth of Gray's Creek, which is just on Highway 179, going out of town, they broke the mast on their keelboat. And so they stopped at a place called Sugarloaf Hill and spent the night. And then William Clark explored that hill, and I'm quite tickled that I got to climb on the same hill back in 2004. It's on private property now, but it was really awesome. And I have that on. They were working for Thomas Jefferson, so it seems logical that they would come to, and Jefferson City is named for Thomas Jefferson. So they were on his mission, and they succeeded. A lot of people thought they were lost because it took them 2.5 years to get through to complete the mission. So that's why Jefferson City is important. Well, let's see. They repaired the mast, of course, upstream a ways, probably around Boonville. And of course, they stopped at a place called Independence Creek and celebrated the 4th of July, I believe, somewhere. And of course, they stopped near St. Joseph, and then they exited the state. Of course, they came back in 1806, and they stopped here in September 19th. So when we celebrated the bicentennial, a lot of towns only did 1 or 2 celebrations or commemorations. Commemorations is the best word. We actually did 2004, 2005, and 2006. And so 2005 was the return of the keelboat, and that was really fun because we took the keelboat, which was made in St. Charles, Missouri. That's another town I forgot to talk about. The reenactors for the bicentennial were from St. Charles, or the St. Charles organization. And so they were a very important part, and so all the festivities we had, they would be a part of it. And in 2005, they parked the keelboat on High Street, and all these little children came by, and I have photos of that that show them, looks really strange, but it really worked well. Well, it just claimed a big piece of land for the United States, and some people said, well, now there were some British guys that actually got to the West Coast first, but they didn't have the impact of these people. So some people said, well, progress would have come anyway, but it was still a really good thing, and we've realized it more. Lewis and Clark wrote the history back then, and so they mainly talked about themselves. They suppressed some of the other people that were on the journey, and so that's why we built this monument. We wanted to show that there was a diverse group of people, the German, Scots-Irish people, York, the African American, and a guy by the name of George Drouillard, who was a Shawnee half-breed. But he was actually the nephew of the founder of Cape Girardeau. So he was really a real Missourian. So of all the people on there, I like George Drouillard the best. Well, Meriwether Lewis planned it all, and he bought a keelboat manufactured in Pennsylvania, brought it down the Ohio River with his dog, Seaman, who he bought in Pittsburgh for $20. The dog went on most of the trip. We think all of the trip. But then they had what they called pirogues. French-Canadian engagés paddled those boats, rivermen, and so they got a few of those people so there were 3 a red pirogue, a white pirogue, and then this massive keelboat, which was kind of a strange looking thing. The river was much different then, and so they sometimes cordelled it, meaning hauled it through the shallows, and then sometimes they used a sail when the wind was right, and then they used muscle power rowing the keelboat, which I can't imagine. So, and so they provisioned it. Lewis planned all the provisions, rations of liquor, rations of just about everything. And of course, they had, for entertainment, they had 2 fiddlers who fiddled all the way up and back. And one of them name was Pierre Toussaint, and I forget the other man's name, but they entertained themselves. That's how they entertained themselves. There was no modern conveniences, no GPS. They were out on their own. So turns out York, the Native American, the African American, they had never seen. And so there's a famous painting by Charles Russell of York and the people touching his skin. They thought they could rub it off, and they thought he had magical powers because in some of their ceremonial dances, they of course used their chieftains painted up in black paint, and so they thought it would rub off. So he was he was like an ambassador of goodwill to them because they thought he had magical powers. The river was much wider, shallower in places, treacherous in other places, lots of stumps and snags, unimproved, things hanging over the river, which, like the sycamore tree, got the Lewis and Clark keelboat mast. So it was completely different before the Corps of Engineers came here. It was completely different than when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, the river ran right down here by the Lowman Landing, and there was no Adrian's Island, and so you had an unobscured view. That's one of the reasons why we placed this monument here, so that Lewis and Clark could be outside and also to look at the Missouri River. Adrian's Island has intervened, and that's, of course, due to the Corps of Engineers.